Deep Threat Sports Network fans, NASCAR fans, welcome back. It's the Splash and Go podcast. Josh, Marty, your host here, Collin. We're ready to get after it, talk about the Watkins Glen race, talk about the Bristol race. Hey, and these fellas are fired up about a couple topics that they're going to get into. But first, real quick, wasn't a great showing for the playoff drivers in NASCAR this last weekend at Go Bowling at the Glen. I think we only had two playoff drivers finish in the top 10. Chase Briscoe at 6th. Austin Cindric at 10th. How the race kind of shaped up, we did have race winner Chris Buescher, who was not in the playoffs. Stage 1 winner Martin Truex. Stage 2 winner Ross Chastain. Once again, not great for playoff drivers. Fellas, tell me what you think.
Collin, I think you nailed it. This was not a good showing by any of our playoff drivers. They look good in the first two stages. I think we might have had a little too high of expectations coming into the Glen. These guys, they were really struggling all day long. Even lap one, we lost Blaney, the top playoff contender. We lost him on lap one. And then a lot of the race after that, we saw Ross Chastain leading. We saw SVG leading. We saw Chase Briscoe up there. We had a really interesting day at Watkins Glen, and it was disappointing to a lot of race fans, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it was a shock. I mean, I knew going that Watkins Glen and with, Atlanta being our last race was going to be a little bit of a wild card there. But we only had two playoff drivers finish in the top 10 with Chase Briscoe. He finished at 6th, and then we had Austin Cindric finished in 10th. The rest of the playoff drivers had a hard time. But if I'm going to talk about people that overachieved, I'm going to give a shout out to old Carson Hocevar. Dude finishes 3rd place, does a great job, runs up front with, SVG, one of the greatest road course racers to ever do it, and Chris Buescher, who's been a great road course racer for a while. It's good that he got that win.
You talked about SVG, Marty. When he comes in, the guy is always a threat at tracks like this, correct? I mean, you always have to expect this guy to go up and make a push, kind of push people around, and really do some bully driving. And I loved what I saw from him yet again. This guy's a real threat in the future. Is there any chance he can kind of come in and be a threat at other tracks, not just road courses?
Well, yes. So Trackhouse is signing him for a full season next year, and I think it's a smart move. The thing about SVG is he can be surgical. He can sit there and toy with you. I think it was a Chicago race, street course race, when they raced the Xfinity Series. Him and Larson, ran side by side for a good portion, for a couple laps there. And I remember Kyle Larson afterwards saying, I could tell he was just playing with me. But he was able to run neck and neck with him, not make contact, and be a very smooth and clean driver. We've also seen that, I think it was at Sonoma in the Xfinity Series, where him and Austin Hill gets into him, tries to bully him. Austin Hill's a big dude. He's punched a couple people. He's talk about somebody who could be a bully from time to time, and SVG had none of it. He got right back into it with him. He, made contact with him, and he is not going to be pushed around in this sport. He's made that kind of abundantly clear. He's better than everybody else in the road courses. He knows that. He knows that NASCAR has a physical element to it on the track, and he's adapted to that as well.
I'm really excited to see him run some of these short tracks next year in the Cup car, being at Bristol, stuff like that, and all these smaller tracks. It's kind of exciting to see maybe if he can show his cards at some of these short tracks.
Was there any strategies from any of these race teams that you guys liked this weekend? Was there anything that any of them showed you that you weren't expecting? I mean, I know you talked about Carson Hocevar, Marty, but was there anybody, I can't say relevant. That's kind of shitty towards Carson Hocevar, but was there anybody that was relevant that had a strategy that really seemed to be the one to go after in this race? I know I saw Tyler Reddick kind of get pushed around quite a bit. I wasn't really excited or amazed with how his performance was. It was pretty subpar. So was there anybody else that comes to your guys' mind that really stood out and you kind of want to shout out to?
Yeah, I mean, I'll shout out to Chris Buescher. He had the best strategy, and we knew that coming down to the end of the race that he was on the quote-unquote winning strategy. I thought he had a great strategy. Some other drivers had some pretty poor strategies, but I think a lot of that had to do with that caution that came out in stage 2 when people were kind of caught not flipping the stage in time, essentially. So that happens on road courses. Unfortunately, you're kind of playing with the clock there a little bit as you want to stay out a little bit longer, maybe because you have clean air, or maybe you're trying to get a couple more laps of fuel under your belt, or whatever you're trying to do. There is a fine line you have to tiptoe around there. And if you get a caution at the wrong time, it can really kind of mess you up. So I thought most playoff drivers just had horrible strategies, but I don't necessarily throw all that on the crew chief. I throw that on untimely cautions uh, and some other mishaps that they had. We could talk about how ridiculous people have been driving here recently back in the pack later on in the podcast, but there are a lot of things that went into it. But these playoff drivers, they got their teeth kicked in this weekend.
I think the strategies this week, a lot of it, the restart strategies after a caution, they need to address that as a team and how they're going about these restarts, because I think these restarts have really been piss poor as of lately, and it really showed here at Glen that these guys are bumping, rubbing, pushing, spinning, all kinds of stuff on the restarts, and it just leads to another caution. And you're watching playoff guys get pushed out, and I don't think this is what race fans want to see.
Oh, buddy, I completely agree. If you go back and look to when we had that Indy Road course, you remember they had that stupid runoff in case you completely blew the first corner there because it was such a tight corner. Then you have somebody like Ross Chastain that has absolutely no intention on the outside on the late restart to make that corner and drives as fast as he can through that little bypass. It comes out in like second or third. If you do not police these drivers on these restarts, if you don't find a way to reel these people in, and I don't know if we have to go back to single file restarts. I would personally like that because you had cleaner racing back when we had single file restarts. And I know there's a subset group of people that wouldn't like that, but we've got to do something. If there's going to be a late race caution, especially at a road course that has a tight first corner, you're going to have caution after caution for a while. And it's so frustrating to watch as a fan. I hate it.
You guys upset with what the drivers are doing, or do you feel like they're doing the right thing because they're not being policed the correct way? I mean, who do you put the blame on, the drivers and the teams, or kind of NASCAR at front office, I guess you could say? Like, who are you guys upset with in this situation?
I think a lot of it comes down to the drivers right now. These are decisions they're making. They changed Watkins Glen turn one. They added rumble strips. It didn't make any difference. It made no difference. Those guys were running all the way outside that turn. Put some hard barriers in there. Make them drive. If they're not willing to drive and drive clean and have clean restarts, make them, or it'll end their day. I mean, at this point, what choice do we have? Or we're just going to keep getting these guys running the corners at these road courses. Put up a hard barrier.
Yeah, I'm going to save my rant to the end. There's no reason for me to get involved with this right now, early in the podcast. I'm going to save mine till we get to the end, till we talk about Martin Truex Jr.'s comments. But as a Rays fan, I've kind of had it up to here with everybody's shit when it comes to that. We'll talk about that later.
Yeah, Martin Truex did not seem to be a happy camper at the end of that race. Had a pretty upset, I guess it wasn't a press conference, but a pretty upset interview. You could tell that the guy was kind of fed up. You could tell that the guy was probably semi-happy he was hanging up the cleats here and kind of moving on. It wasn't a sad scene, but it kind of hits you a little bit. Martin Truex, you guys have alluded to this before on this podcast. He tries to do things the right way. He's not one to drive through somebody. He just races clean, man, and he's just a good driver. So absolutely, the disrespect on the track has kind of really ran its course. Pun intended here. It's not been as much fun to watch necessarily because I don't always feel like the best drivers are getting in there. For example, Chris Buescher should really be a part of this conversation in the playoffs. And what happens to him? We have a driver earlier in the season dump him and keep him out of the playoffs. And here he just gets a playoff win, but it's kind of for nothing because he's not in the standings.
And that driver was already that dumped Buescher earlier in the season already was guaranteed into the playoffs.
Yeah, there was no need for it. It was a completely unnecessary move on his part. Absolutely just dumb, no respect racing, even though I am a Tyler Reddick fan, but it was just lack of respect out on the track.
It's not just a Tyler Reddick problem. It's every young race car. The reason why Martin Truex is upset is because he's an older driver and he grew up in this sport when there was respect, when there was an unwritten code in this sport. These young drivers, you can't necessarily blame them because if they don't drive this way, there's somebody two series down that's going to take their ride and will drive that way. And as a car owner, buddy, you got to get results. So you're kind of put into a box to a certain degree. So I do put it on the drivers, but I put this massively on NASCAR. NASCAR tends to do one of two things no matter what happens. One,
I agree with you.
They have a knee-jerk reaction to something ridiculous, and I don't like it. Or two, they wait for this pot to bubble and boil over with a lid that's not secure that's not fastened on, and the lid blows off this thing, and it turns into a black eye, and it becomes embarrassing for our sport. So I guess I'll go ahead and get into a little bit of rant here. And so for our viewers at home, if you're listening on earbuds or you're listening in your car or something, maybe crank the volume down, because I tend to work myself up. I'll warn you here. I get going, I get more pissed off as I get going. I work myself up, and I'm going to get a little upset. So if you look back, and I'm going to throw a big chunk of this on the playoff system, the playoff format that we have, but it is what it is. This is our playoff format. It's not changing. I've come to accept that. But you don't even have to go that far back. So if you think back like 2004, the first iteration that we had of the chase for the cup, where we had the 10-race playoff format there at the end of the season, Casey Kane and Tony Stewart had multiple run-ins throughout the season before we ever got to the playoffs. They had multiple run-ins, and it boiled over to place at Chicagoland. Casey Kane stays out late on the track, stays out on old tires. Tony Stewart's the first one in line. This is back when we had single-file restarts, so all your cars on the inside were a lap down. All your cars on the outside on a restart are your lead lap cars. So Casey Kane's in front of Tony Stewart on the outside entering turn one. Tony Stewart has fresher tires, overdrives the corner, spins Casey Kane out. Big wreck, takes some hard hits, and his crew had enough. Tommy Baldwin, an old school crew chief that I heard about this dude getting in a fight a couple weeks ago, and he's going through cancer treatment right now. He's like 70 years old, and he's still throwing dukes at a local dirt track.
I'm a fan of him. I'm a fan of him.
Oh, yeah. So he goes down there, him and the Evernham 9-car pit crew, they go down to the 20 pit, and they start throwing dukes. Jack's hands are flying. Tommy Baldwin's shirt's ripped off. They didn't take shit, and I'm tired of it. You have to do that. You cannot allow people to continue to treat you like this in the sport. If you are a young driver out there, and you're allowing people to push you around like that, and there's not physical consequences for this, you've got to stop. Stop it. I'm tired of it. I'm so sick and tired of seeing this shit week in and week out. You have drivers that are getting dumped, and they sit there and they're like, oh, payback's a bitch, and then nothing ever happens. Nothing ever happens. You know why? Because you have this win in your in format, and people get a free reset. If this was a full 36-race season where you had to sit there and grind to win a championship, like this happened in the past. I always go back to like Ricky Rudd and Dale Earnhardt. I don't know if they ever resolved that. I don't know if those two ever got over that shit. They were mad at each other because it took Earnhardt, and I think he won the championship this year. I can't remember. I think it was at North Wilkesboro. They go into a late race caution, late race restart. They go into turn one. Ricky Rudd washes up into Dale Earnhardt, spins him out, and Dale Earnhardt was pissed. Ricky Rudd was mad at Dale Earnhardt for stuff that had happened 10 years earlier when he got his ride back at RCR. These people used to hold grudges. They didn't forget about stuff. Now I feel like these young drivers, they go out there, and as long as they get a win, yeah, they may not forget about it, but they're not going to do anything about it. There's never physical repercussions for anything, ever. You have to let them know that if you're going to treat me like this, I'm going to stick my foot up your ass. And don't just put it on the driver. If NASCAR wants to have their little official out there, like you remember when Noah Gragson got cracked by Ross Chastain? Noah Gragson was going to crack him back, but you had an official go up there, pull a judo move, and block his punch so he couldn't punch him back. Send the whole pit crew down there. That NASCAR official can't take everybody. Send the whole damn pit crew down there and take care of this stuff. I'm tired of watching it because it always affects the outcome of a race. I'm so sick and tired of all these late race cautions affecting the outcome of races. NASCAR used to have a pretty strict policy on this. You had people that were pulling off roll bar padding and chucking it out their window to get a debris caution. NASCAR said, no, you're directly affecting the outcome of a race. We're not going to have it. We're putting our foot down. We're going to fine you for that. We're drawing this line in the sand. But now all of a sudden, we don't do that anymore. We'll do it for something like that. But, if Denny Hamlin, I'll never forget this, 08, Dale Earnhardt Jr., new ride with Hendrick. Kyle Busch leaves Hendrick. He's racing for Joe Gibbs Racing. They're at Richmond. This race is coming down between the two of them. They're going to have a 2-driver shootout to win this race. Denny Hamlin clearly has a flat right front tire, and he rides around the inside of the track going like 40 miles an hour, trying to limp it along. What do you know? He blows his right front, debris on the track, caution waves, late race restart. Kyle Busch overdrives the corner, locks it up, wrecks Dale Earnhardt. Clint Boyer, somebody who was not going to win that race. He was not going to win that race, ends up winning that race because you had that driver on the inside affecting the outcome of a race. So, Collin, I got to throw in my Denny Hamlin hate here a little bit, so close your eyes. I'm going to take a little scene from 22 Jump Street. Close your eyes. Who am I? Me.
Oh, that's definitely Denny being a little bitch.
There we go. So I got to throw in my Denny Hamlin hate there a little bit. But let's go back to this season. Everybody talks about the Austin Dillon incident at Richmond. It was ridiculous. Something did need to be done about it. But nobody talks about Ricky Stenhouse Jr. racing Ryan Preece, not even for position, in front of the leader, and wrecks him. Completely changes the outcome of the race. And I'm so sick and tired of it. It pisses me off, man. It pisses me off. This is why people from the outside looking into our sport will watch a race like that and they'll say, man, this kind of reminds me of WWE. Well, they're not wrong. They're not wrong. They have a legitimate problem. So if I'm race control, I am sitting there. I don't have a hot. It's coming down to the end of the race, and we have a good battle getting ready to set up. And thank God Chris Buescher won this race, or else I'd be even madder. But you have a good battle shaping up. You have one of the best regular oval racer, road course racers, trying to fend off one of the best road course racers in the world. And it's coming down to it. It's looking good. He's gaining on him. Can he hold him off? I don't know. Because you always have people out there driving like an asshole in 20 seconds, sitting there saying, well, if I wreck him, we'll go into overtime. We'll get to re-rack this, and I'll get a second chance. And if we wreck again, I'll just kind of inch my way up the field. And maybe instead of finishing 22nd, I'll finish 15th. NASCAR's got to get this under control. It looks like shit. I'm tired. Dude, race control needs to figure it out. Figure it out, man. Who are they hiring to have race control here that are calling these races? You'll sit there and, if it is a natural process, it happens. It happens all the time. 2 laps ago, somebody blows a right front and knocks down the wall. That happens. That I understand. But people back there driving like jackasses because they know they're not going to win this race, and they're just going to dump the person in front of them. And don't tell me that's not what's happening. That's not what is happening, because I know that's what's happening. They're dumping the person in front of them, or they're getting into them a little bit. Oh, man, if we get a caution, we'll get to re-rack them. We'll see why. I bet you this is a very, very small estimate here, but I'm willing to bet that on a given season, we probably have 6 to 9 drivers that win races that have no business winning races because they were not going to win that race. And I'm sick and tired of watching the best car week in and week out on the weekends put on a clinic. You're putting on a clinic in the back of your head. You know that something's going to happen at the end of the race. It's going to affect the outcome of this race, possibly. And if that driver doesn't win, it's a damn shame. And it's not because it happens naturally. Somebody blows a tire. Somebody spins out. It's because people are driving like assholes and nobody has any respect. NASCAR needs to start finding the crew chief and the drivers of people that are directly affecting the outcome of the race. That's how you fix this. That is how you fix this. You have to put your foot down and say, I'm tired of this. I'm tired of you affecting the outcome of the race. I'm not going to allow the driver in 22nd. Look, the driver in 22nd, I understand. If you're 20th in points, the difference between 20th and 18th is huge. I don't want to take that away from the drivers, but at the end of the race, you have to drive with respect. You've had the entire race to try to figure out your car and try to figure out track position. You don't need to wreck people to get a restart and affect the outcome of the race now with 2 laps to go. You've had 200 other laps to figure out. Why are you doing it now? They need to stop it.
I totally agree with you, seriously. And I love the passion. I've loved listening to you and Josh talking about the sport of NASCAR. You guys are very passionate race fans. I love this shit, man. Let them know. Hey, let them know what they're doing wrong with this. I totally agree with you. And maybe a fun stat that the 3 of us can put our heads together and do a little research on is how many of these races this season have come down to, a late caution where you're overtime racing. I'm willing to bet it's 75% of these races this year. I feel like every race I watch, it's an overtime race. You're exactly right, Marty. I love the passion. Josh, I'm assuming you feel the same way, correct? This is not how we want to see races finish. We're losing the best cars. These guys, honestly, they're not even in control of their own fate here at the end of these races, man. Marty, you're right. It's bullshit. Josh, I guess you probably feel the same way.
Yeah. As a fan, it's really hard to sit down and watch 390 laps of clean racing with minimal cautions, and you're watching strategies play out throughout the race. And the guy who's leading should be up in the lead, and the teams that are right behind him should be up there. We might see a really good battle in the last 10 laps, going through the race. And then you get these late stage cautions, and the last 10 laps takes an hour. It takes an hour because every restart, they're wadding them up. And
that's not a joke. Yeah.
And you're watching guys, lose playoff contention. It's a shame. I don't really know what NASCAR can do about it. I think, honestly, from a marketing standpoint, these guys beating each other's asses after the race is pretty good marketing. Because you know what I'm going to do? I saw that on NASCAR on Sunday. Somebody got their ass beat, and they're racing again this weekend. Holy cow! I'm going to tune in, and I'm going to see another ass whipping after the race. Hopefully.
Well, and you know us.
It works well for hockey. It works well for hockey in the playoffs. I mean, seriously, sometimes you go to a fight and a hockey game breaks out. And I'm not saying that I want this sport to turn into that, but I'm saying that we all know how we were raised. There's a certain way that you don't allow people to treat you. We were raised a certain way. You never let anybody treat you like that. You never let anybody take money out of your wallet or take food off your table. And that's essentially what these people are doing. And nobody does anything about it. It makes us look like a bunch of fools. Another thing, how do you think a kid racing a local dirt track is looking up to whoever, Tyler Reddick or whoever, Joey Logano, and sees him drive this way? He goes out on a local track and drives that way. Think about the amount of money he's costing all the drivers around him. You're going to get your ass whooped. You're going to get hurt.
Listen, man, you drive like that at a dirt track, you're getting your ass kicked. You damn right. You're getting your ass kicked.
Period. Because you're taking food off people's table. You're taking money out of their pockets. And I think, honestly, get rid of the overtime. Start finishing these races under caution again. Because if somebody in 22nd just thinks they're going to dump somebody, no, well, you might have dumped the person in front of you, so you're going to finish 21st because we're not re-racking them. That's where you finish. Good job, asshole. Close the book on it.
I will say, I don't have the answers, obviously, but I don't want that finish either because I feel like it really does limit. Once again, I think you handcuff really good drivers that are making a push at the very end. So I'm not a fan of that either, but I'm with you, man. Something's got to be done. But that kind of leads us right into this next race. We're going to playoff race number 3, Bass Pro Shops night race at Bristol, 6:30 on USA this Saturday, September 21st, 500 laps. Fellas, this is a concrete track. There's some tire wear here, a lot of tire wear here. They're congested. They're always driving tight. They're always bouncing off one another. This is known to kind of have a big one break out maybe anywhere on the track, not just the turns. Can happen on the straightaways and pile up a lot of drivers. So right here with this topic, this kind of goes hand in hand. Hey, it's Bristol, baby. What are we expecting here? How are these guys going to pile this thing up? Are we going to see pile-ups? Are we going to see some retaliation racing? Who has the best chances? What do you guys think here again with this race? I mean, there's a lot of drama surrounding all of this playoff standings right now. You guys are fired up. I'm fired up. I'm sure these drivers and teams are fired up. What are we going to see this Saturday night, and why should we all tune in?
I think we're going to see a meat grinder. I think it's going to be bad. I think there's going to be quite a few big wrecks. You know, the embankments on this track, on the straightaway, they're at like 35 to 38 degrees. I think it's 36 on the back, 38 on the front. And these embankments, you know, if you get spun or you slide out, you are going down that track. And you, as a fan, you pray that whoever slides is in the back, because if they're in the front, it is a mess. You're collecting 2, 3, 4. I've seen 8-car, 10-car collections at Bristol before, and it's not pretty. And if we get some good, clean racing, it'll be a good race. The problem is when they get that good, clean racing, you start getting lap cars. And getting around these lap cars is where you start having problems, and that's where guys get spun. And you have big wrecks. It'll be the guy in the back of the pack and the guy in the front of the pack, and they're spinning out. And it's going to be a meat grinder, I think.
Well, that's what I was fixing to say, Josh. To your point, you were talking about how hope it's at the back. Well, sometimes this track gets so, I can't say spread out, but spread out enough because it's so small where the back of the pack is right there with the front of the pack, to your point. So, yeah, absolutely. I mean, all bets are off on this. Everything's on the table. Who knows what we're going to see here? Marty, kind of give us your breakdown, kind of what you're looking out for here.
So, yeah, I've seen the leader at this track get wrecked multiple times, or get gathered and wrecked many times. I mean, you are not safe anywhere on this track. There are certain tracks where you can be in a hornet's nest, you can kind of get clear from it, you can kind of regroup and be like, whew, okay, I've got a little bit of breathing room. You have no breathing room here. And now, you know, I don't want to sound like a hypocrite, but in the past, this was a track where drivers left mad at they would leave mad at each other. So it used to be the groove was always at the bottom, and it was tough to pass people. You had to get a run on them coming off the exit of the corner, and you'd have to get to the left rear quarter panel. You'd have to kind of budge in there with your elbows a little bit to kind of gain that position. And a lot of times people would wash up the track, get inside of somebody and spin them out. That was what attracted fans to Bristol. It was short track racing. It was Henri racing. People got mad at each other. I can remember Jeff Gordon, shoving Matt Kenseth in 2006 on pit road. I can remember Robbie Gordon getting pissed off at Dale Jr. on pit road. I can remember Ward Burton throwing, I think it was his heat guards for the bottom of his feet at Dale Jr.'s window. Tony Stewart throwing helmets. People get mad at this track, but that is a natural consequence of short track racing. That's not somebody driving in 22nd trying to affect the outcome of a race, in my opinion. People will say that that's hypocritical, but it's not. It's two completely different forms of racing. The one good thing that NASCAR has is you do have a bumper and you do have fenders, and you can use that to your advantage on tracks like this. So there are no safe spots. Like Josh said, it's a self-cleaning track. So anybody who spins up near the wall, including the straightaways, I think it's hard. You spin out on the straightaway, you're almost always going to hit the inside wall. That inside pit wall there, you're going to hit that. You spin on the corner, you're eventually coming back down, and God knows how many people you're taking with you. So it's kind of like a restricted play speedway of short tracks where you can have the big one. And with the NASCAR's new damaged vehicle policy, you better get on pit road. You better fix your car and get back out there if you're a playoff driver, or you could be like Kyle Larson was in round one. Ryan Blaney was at Watkins Glen. You could lead this damn race with 1 point, and you can't afford that in the playoffs.
Looking at Bristol with the way our standings are right now, if I'm Joe Gibbs, I've got my defibrillator sitting right next to me going into this race, because you got Martin Truex Jr. in 15th place. You've got Denny Hamlin in 13th place, and you got your boy Ty Gibbs barely in there. I got the defib sitting right next to me, because this could be a bad day for Joe Gibbs Racing, and you're stuck with Christopher Bell left in there.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up, Josh, because I was going to go ahead and give us a little update on kind of where the playoff standings are sitting. In first in the playoff standings right now, we have Joey Logano. 2 through 11, I'm going to kind of let them go to the side. You guys can read the screen later and see kind of where those guys are at. But you're right. Right there on the cut line, we have Ty Gibbs. In the 13th spot, we have Denny Hamlin. In the 14th spot, we have Brad Keselowski. 15, Martin Truex. 16, my boy Harrison Burton. We won't talk about that much anymore. That shit kind of sailed. The hot take wasn't so hot. But hey, is this really working for Denny Hamlin? Is this really what? He can't feel safe here, right? This is a known track where he's good at. I'll be a spoiler. I'll go ahead and say it. He's my pick to win this race because I feel like he has to. So how is this going to fare for him, man? Where is this guy going to want to run here? He wanted to run the back of the pack of Atlanta for the most part, try to avoid some catastrophes. It's not paying out for him right now. Where does he need to run here? This tire wear is going to be deadly, right?
So I'll say this about the Denny Hamlin situation. At this point, it's all on Denny Hamlin. The way he went into Atlanta, his strategy in Atlanta was piss poor. He knows it. His crew knows it. And he knew that going into Watkins Glen, and he should have done something about it in qualifying. He should have been ready to qualify. He should have put some extra practice time in. I don't remember how many laps he practiced, but it wasn't very many laps. So he should have been out there. He should have qualified better. This all goes back on him. And like I said, Bristol's a meat grinder. If he finds himself in an early race wreck and it puts him out, he's done. It's over.
Well, so that's my point here.
He's such a good driver. He has to qualify. He
Yeah.
has got to qualify well, and he has got to stay in the front of the pack all day and pray that anything that goes on is behind him.
Well, that's my point. I don't want to beat a dead horse, but this is truly, in my opinion, the biggest talking point of the playoffs. This is one of the best drivers in NASCAR, whether anybody likes him or we like him or not. And this guy's dicking around. I know we keep talking. I just don't understand, man. I don't. It's like you sandbagging to mount the greatest comeback and go from off the cut line to first. But I just don't get it. And you're right. This is a meat grinder. I'm nervous for the guy. I feel like the sport of NASCAR is better when he's in the playoffs because he is one of the best drivers. I want this. I can't stand the guy, but I want this. As dumb as that sounds, Marty. What do you think?
Yeah, I agree. Like Buescher started Watkins Glen in 24th, I think, and ended up winning the race. But you can do that when you have a good car and you have sound pitch strategy. If Denny Hamlin does not have blistering speed in his car and he qualifies mid-pack or back, he's going to be in real trouble because I don't know how you can make up track position at a track like this. If we have tire wear like we had earlier in the spring, which I'm not saying we will, there's a lot of things that go into that factor, whether, it's a concrete track. Will it rubber in from other races throughout the weekend? I don't know those things. It's always hard to tell tire wear, because I think we can kind of talk about how we were supposed to have 4-second fall off at Watkins Glen, and fall off and tire wear are two different things. Tire wear is ideal. Fall off is also kind of ideal, but you can kind of cool off your tires and kind of gain some of that back sometimes. In Watkins Glen, I didn't see the tires being, Ross Chastain stayed out on old tires and led the race for a long portion of that. Here at Bristol, I don't think you're going to be able to do that. So he's going to have to come out. If he doesn't qualify well, he's going to have a lot of speed in that car to work his way up the field. He very well could. He's good at this track. But if we have tire wear and you don't have the speed in your car, you're not going to be able to use pit strategy. You take 2 right side tires or stay out and get fresh air. You're not going to be able to use those different pit strategies to try to gain track position. So he needs to figure out his qualifying big time. I'm not saying that that's the only thing that has screwed him up in this playoffs, but it's becoming quite a concerning factor at this point. And another driver that I'm looking for a strong run here, because I didn't think he'd have a good run this weekend, and he didn't, and that's Brad Keselowski. He's good here. I could see him. He's only 12 points below the cut line. I can see him being above the cut line after this race.
Well, hey, before you dive into the Brad Keselowski talk too much, I was going right there. So before we dive into him, I want to also throw in Martin Truex in this conversation, because I want you guys to tell me what Martin Truex and Brad Keselowski have to do to safely find their way into the playoffs. I don't want to give all the talk to Denny Hamlin, so I'm glad you brought him up. What do these two drivers have to do to have a chance here?
Throwing Ty Gibbs, too. Throwing Ty Gibbs. He's not safe. Neither is Chase Briscoe. There's a lot of guys that aren't safe, but those people are very, very close.
Well, do we think Brad Keselowski, that was kind of my point. Do we think Brad Keselowski and Martin Truex jump Chase Briscoe and Ty Gibbs this weekend?
I don't know. That's a question
I know it's an unpredictable track.
After
I know
qualifying,
it's really
maybe.
Yeah.
It's hard to say coming into this.
I'll say this: Brad Keselowski and Martin Truex Jr. don't have momentum currently under their belt, and they haven't for a while. So they're going to have to find some lightning in a bottle here. They're going to have to figure something out.
Well, talking about momentum, Chase Briscoe has that momentum.
Exactly. And Ty Gibbs, he's a driver that always seems to find his way up front and seems to find a way to piss it away at the end of a race. And I'm not throwing that all on Ty Gibbs. Matter of fact, I'm probably not going to throw very much of it on him at all. Sometimes that's just circumstantial. Sometimes it's the people around you. Sometimes it's just pit road strategy. Sometimes it's a 10-cent part in your car that breaks at the end of the race. But Ty Gibbs, I think Chase Briscoe, with his momentum that he's having right now, I could see him transferring into the playoffs. Don't forget, he's going to be driving that 19 car next season. It's good. They're going to have to do something, man. The 19 car is kind of in trouble. Talk about somebody struggling with momentum or the lack thereof. And Brad Keselowski just hasn't been noticeable in a while. And it's pretty bizarre.
That chrome number still looks good on the side.
Oh, yeah.
And Boucher 17.
Hey, if that's the highlight of what we had to talk about, that's not good.
Tell me that chrome number just doesn't brick you up. It does to me. I see it. I don't care if it's in last place. I'm like, damn, that looks good.
Especially under the lights at Bristol, it's going to look real good.
Yeah, never look at the standings of the race. Just when you see his car go by, just automatically assume the chrome number's out front. I'm with you, because there's not a whole lot else to talk about Brad Keselowski. I almost feel like Brad Keselowski is kind of like a silent assassin. They don't talk about him the whole race. He doesn't really do much. Next thing you know, you look up and you're like, holy hell, this guy really is running in the top 10. Nobody's talked about him all race. I also kind of want to throw this hot take out there. Do we think that maybe Brad Keselowski and Martin Truex have just kind of lost focus and lost, not necessarily the heart, but like lost the motivation to just really go out there and get it? I was really not thrown off. Yeah, I could say I was thrown off by Martin Truex's interview. It appeared to me that the guy just had no interest in even being there almost at that point. So I guess that's why I'm curious about these kind of older drivers that have been around for a little bit. I just don't feel like they really have that go-get-it attitude right now.
My comments on the Martin Truex thing after seeing that interview with him, maybe this new driving style that Marty was talking about with these late-stage cautions and these guys just not giving a shit and there's no consequences for it. Maybe that's what's pushing him out. Maybe that's why he decided to retire mid-season. I don't know, but clearly he's upset about something. And part of me kind of hopes next year when he comes back at Daytona, because he's going to run like nine races next year, I think. Kind of hoping maybe we see a villain and he just starts dumping guys since he's not a full-time driver anymore. Maybe not. I think he has a little more couth about him than that. So, and also Brad Keselowski's in this for the long haul. He's a part owner in RFK. He's here. He's not
It's a great point.
Anywhere.
Great point.
He's a very skilled driver. I think he just struggled with that Ford at the beginning of the season. He finally got a win under his belt. I think it had been, I forget how many races it had been, but it had been a while. It had been almost 2.5 seasons since he had a win. And I think they're still figuring some stuff out with the Ford car. And I can't really sit here and say that he's out or he wants to retire anytime soon. I think he's still fully vested in the sport, but he's also having to adapt, I think, to the way these younger drivers are driving. And it's not something he's used to. At one point in time when Brad Keselowski was coming up in the Cup Series, he was that young buck too, and he was making some of the same mistakes these young kids are making now. And I think he's a little bit more matured and aging, and he's kind of looking back and saying, wow, this is what these older guys were pissed off at me about. And I think he's having to kind of deal with it in stride. And, I think I don't know.
Maybe getting some humble pie here, a little bit,
It happens. So you always have to kind of, this is true in all sports. You get to a certain age where every season you kind of have to wake up for the start of the season and you have to kind of ask yourself, am I willing to make the same sacrifices that I had to make last year in order to be competitive? And, a funny person that I listened to talk about this a little bit was Matt Kenseth, because Matt Kenseth was what I would call a tier A driver in our sport who wanted to get paid late in his career. And Joe Gibbs Racing wasn't willing to do that. And he didn't have a ride. And it just blew me away. So he's out of the car for a while. Kyle Larson does his thing and loses his ride. And Matt Kenseth starts driving that 42 Chip Ganassi car. And I can't remember exactly what I was watching it on. I think it was the Dale Jr. download. And he was like, look, man, you get away from grinding every lap of every race because we have stages now. Every position matters. You get stage points involved now. You can't just sit there and ride around and save your stuff and kind of see what you have and kind of hold position and fix your stuff later on a pit stop. Those days are behind us. So Matt Kenseth kind of talked about how, like, look, man, I was in a position where I was not willing to do that every weekend for every lap of every race. That ship had kind of sailed. Now, Martin Truex Jr. has some pretty, intense things that have happened. He lost his longtime girlfriend to cancer. That was just awful to watch it over the years. She was with him through. Martin Truex has had a lot of highs, but he's had more lows than he has highs in the sport. He starts out at a struggling DEI. He's there for a while, gets shipped to Mike Waltrip Racing. That is kind of on the up and up. And then, man, they have that playoff race where they got caught cheating basically over the radio, spinning out on purpose to try to affect the outcome of a race, which directly affected the outcome of the playoffs. And he gets booted out of the playoffs and then loses his ride. Then he goes to Furniture Racing, which is pretty much considered a 20th place car on back. It starts having some success in, a freaking race team based out of Colorado, I think, at the time, and ends up winning a championship. And this whole time, his lifelong partner is sick and she's struggling. And then, I think it was 2 years ago, she unfortunately passes. Now, I understand that they broke up before all this, but that's a very complex situation. So he's had and I don't think he's been the same since that.
Well,
he's had a lot of awful things that have happened. So look, man, at some point you got to sit there and just kind of roll with the budgets and be like, I think I've gotten what I want out of this aspect of my life.
Well, and to your point, though, none of us here know how any of that feels in the sense of like our information and our personal lives aren't out for the public to see. He's battling a hell of a battle at home with his girlfriend at the time for what she was going through. And here it is. It's at the forefront of NASCAR talk 50% of the time. They're constantly bringing it up. I'm sure these people just kind of wanted some peace. You're exactly right. Martin Truex has been through a lot. It makes you gain a ton of respect for the guy. I do hope for good things for him going forward. Hell, I would love to see this guy make a late playoff push here. I cheer for the guy a lot. I do think he does things the right way. But you brought up a couple of good points, too, that I kind of want to hit on. About the Matt Kenseth thing. You're exactly right. At some point, these drivers have to wake up and reevaluate expectations for themselves. Hey, what am I after here? What do I really want? Do I really want to keep doing this? Am I all the way in? Because in this sport, you have to be all the way in, or you're going to find yourself slipping out the back, losing rides, et cetera, et cetera. But one thing I kind of want to ask you guys a little bit too, because we've talked about these drivers a lot here, I feel like, is there any possible chance there's any animosity going on in Joe Gibbs Racing internally? Not necessarily, driver to driver, but is there by chance any animosity with the ownership or whoever at Joe Gibbs Racing?
I don't really think so. Christopher Bell has himself a secure spot. Truex is retiring. Denny Hamlin has himself a secure spot. I don't think there's any animosity. I think they all have a secure spot at Joe Gibbs Racing. I don't really see any animosity going on in the inner workings.
So I'm going to play devil's advocate a little bit here. I think Joe Gibbs Racing is one operation where you kind of have to watch your back at all times. Matt Kenseth gets pushed out of a ride there because he comes asking for more money, and they get rid of him. Eric Jones, they get rid of him early in his career, who I thought was a great talent. Oh, okay, yeah, he's not winning 9 races a year, but that's not to be expected, I feel like, at that point in his career. Then you see Kyle Busch ask for more money and loses his ride. They find ways in that organization, in my opinion, to get rid of people that ask for too much money and try to bring in the new hot next thing. And I kind of understand why they do that, because a few years ago, we were talking about how young and inexperienced Hendrick Motorsports was, and look at them now. It's like you have to rip that Band-Aid off, get a young group of hot drivers, give them time to develop in order to dominate the sport 6 years down the road. So I understand kind of why they do that. But if I'm at Joe Gibbs Racing, I don't have a whole lot of loyalty, or I'm struggling with finding loyalty in organizations that has showed me that they haven't given that loyalty to drivers in the past. So I don't think there's necessarily animosity, but I'd be looking over my shoulder a little bit from time to time.
Well, I'm glad you said those things, because I kind of let my mind race here, a pun intended dad joke there for you, but I kind of let my mind race because Josh brought this point up. Martin Truex just announced his midseason he's going to retire. Denny Hamlin, you kind of hear him over the radio every once in a while going back and forth, and then we talked about everything he's done in the playoffs so far. He also is part owner in another team. Maybe he's kind of stuck in between there a little bit. And then I just go back to the Ty Gibbs thing, being the owner's grandson, that kind of plays a part in my mind a little bit. Are these other drivers kind of getting frustrated that maybe, and I'm not saying this is what's happening, I'm just speculating, that maybe Ty Gibbs is getting a little more attention, or a little more this, a little more that. And also, to your point, Marty, they have no problem dumping drivers and moving on. So that's kind of why I was asking. I don't necessarily think that there's 100% something going on. I just feel like there's kind of a lot of pawns being moved around here or there that kind of makes my mind race. So that's why I wanted to see what you two fellas had to say about that, because you guys know way more than me. So I just wanted some more input. But with all of these things being said, I want to congratulate Marty for the win last week. His driver coming in, beating me and Josh. Marty, who did you have? You had Kyle Larson?
Finished 12th, baby. 12th for the win. Shows you how bad these playoff drivers struggled, man. Finishes 12th, gets me the dub.
Kyle Larson finishing 12th, taking the dub. All right, so Marty, for the fans here, go ahead and remind them what your charity of choice is.
My charity of choice is March of Dimes for premature babies.
I love that. I absolutely love that. That strikes a place with you and I both. I absolutely love to hear that. Let's not forget Josh Collin, the outright winner in week 1 of the playoffs at Atlanta. You just see me sitting back here in last place. This is no surprise. These two are much smarter than me. I went ahead and already spoiled my Bristol winner pick with Denny Hamlin. It's going to be hard to cheer for that, but hell, I got to get on the board. I got to do something, because this has just been a piss poor performance from me. Josh, go ahead and tell us who your driver for the week is.
I've really put a lot of thought into this, and with it being such a meat grinder, I've kind of been tiptoeing around it. I'm going to go with Christopher Bell.
Marty, go ahead and get into yours. I just want to say one thing real quick before we get on to Marty, actually, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, fellas, but I think each one of us has now picked Christopher Bell throughout the playoffs. I think Marty had him week 1, if I remember. Josh, I had him last week, and Josh, you have him this week. Is that correct?
No, Marty had Elliott the first week and then Larson last week.
Okay.
You did have Bell last week, though.
Okay. I just felt like we're saying his name a lot here in the playoffs, and hey, it's really working if you're picking it because the guy's performing. But yeah, Marty, let's kick it back over to you. I see you over there thinking. You got the thinking cap on.
It's tough. It's tough, but I'm going to obviously pick a playoff driver. So, man, I just don't know. This is a tough pick, but I'm going to go with Brad Keselowski. He has to go out there and have a good run. He has to.
Wow.
He has no momentum, but this is a track where a driver can make a bit of a difference, and I do think experience pays off here. So I'm going to go with Bad Brad, as they call him on the streets.
I love it, man. To your point, the guy has to go out there and have a great performance and probably get a dub at this point. That's why I love that pick. But hey, real quick now, Josh, I'm going to kick it over to you first. Why don't we review your picks for your first 4 out? Tell us where they're sitting. How are you looking for the first 4 out? Don't get into your final 4 just yet. We'll come back to that and circle around. Tell me about your first 4 out. How you looking?
I'm about 50%. So Bowman actually has been driving very well, as Marty predicted he would do. So he's holding in pretty tight there in the number 4 playoff spot. Suarez had a pretty decent week last week. He got some stage points. He's looking pretty good going into the next round. And I'm confident now to say that Suarez will be in the next round. On the other hand, I have Martin Truex Jr., who we've been discussing for quite a bit on this podcast. And I hate to have him there. That's not where I want him. I want him holding that championship trophy above his head. That's really what I'd like to see, especially on his last season in NASCAR. But looking at it, it's just not looking good unless he could pull off a win or, stay in the top 5 through all 3 stages this week, And then we got your boy, Harrison Burton, pretty much right where everybody expected him to be. And I think that kind of shows
Except me.
Shows the problems with how these playoff series work.
Well, before we kick it over to Marty, you brought up Daniel Suarez. Fellas, I really think we need to tip the cap to him again. This guy is exceeding expectations. I don't know if, Marty, if you had him out, you'll let us know, but I also had Daniel Suarez not making it past the first round, and this guy's absolutely killing it. I just want to shout out to that guy because this is really spectacular what he's doing this far. But, Marty, why don't you give us your 4 that you got missing this next round?
So, look, man, just to kind of tie off to what you guys were saying, stage points are killing some people, and stage points are helping some people in these playoffs. Brad Keselowski doesn't have a single stage point yet in these playoffs. It's awful. That's awful. Denny Hamlin only has 1 stage point. It's terrible. Christopher Bell has had some decent finishes, but only has 1 playoff point or stage point. On the flip side of that, you have Alex Bowman, who's leading everybody with 28 stage points in these playoffs. Right below him is Austin Cindric with 25. So you can kind of see how you've got to go out there and claw through fingernails and try to get everything you can, because people like to say, well, they got a big buffer. They'll be fine. They'll probably make it to the round of 4. No. Larson goes to Atlanta, hits the wall at 160 miles an hour and gets 1 point. Ryan Blaney gets 1 point this weekend. No, you've got to get these stage points. So my picks, obviously, I had Harrison Burton out. That's not a surprise. Suarez and Cindric, and Briscoe, I had them out. Cindric, I think, is the kind of the person that's not getting enough praise here, kind of the unsung hero of these playoffs. He has gone out there and kind of drawn a line in the sand, saying, because Ryan Blaney had a good showing in Atlanta. So did Cindric. Ryan Blaney had a terrible showing at Watkins Glen. Cindric did okay. Joey Logano wins the race at Atlanta, has a good showing for Penske Racing. I don't remember where Joey finished this race, but, I remember him having some stage points and leading for a while. But Austin Cindric is doing great, and I really misread that with my pick. So the only person that I've kind of, Burton is the only one that I have right now. So
it looks like Joey Logano finished 16th, I think, maybe.
Okay.
That sounds about right. But yeah, Marty, to your point, we have 3 of the 4 same drivers here. I was the one that thought maybe Harrison Burton could pull a cat out of a hat and make something happen. I didn't want to
He's
be
got
so
a cool
cocky.
looking car, man. He's got a cool looking car. I love the car. I love everything about the ride.
Came off a late regular season win. I thought maybe he'd carry some momentum. I didn't want to kind of all of us be the same. But yeah, Harrison Burton, he's long gone probably. But anyway, I had Suarez, Chase Briscoe, Ty Gibbs, and Austin Cindric. And just like a second ago, I was talking about Daniel Suarez not getting enough credit. Marty, you are 100% correct. Austin Cindric's absolutely killing this shit. None of us saw this coming. I guess while I'm on that topic, do either one of you think, is there any chance in hell Austin Cindric can make a run at this thing? And I don't mean the next round. I mean a true absolute run for the Cup here. Is there any chance at all?
I think there's a solid chance if Austin Cindric keeps this up. He's in Phoenix. I'm even going to go out on the line and say shame on all 3 of us for counting Daniel Suarez out of the first round, because if he keeps up racing how he is right now, there's a solid chance this man's in Phoenix. And all 3 of us picked him to be out in the first round, and boy, is he proving us wrong.
Yeah, I feel like my biggest thing with Suarez is I don't think Suarez is a bad driver. I just think Trackhouse has struggled a little bit this year. That was my biggest reason for kind of picking against them a little bit. You know, Cindric races at Team Penske, and Penske's a pretty squared away team. I think Penske struggles at times, but they also find ways to find speed at certain points in the season. But I just didn't see – I'm an Austin Cindric fan, but I didn't think that he was developed enough at this point in his career to be doing what he's doing on the track. So from a developmental standpoint, it caught me off guard with Cindric.
I don't think we give enough anybody for that instance. I don't think anybody gives enough credit to this Penske team a lot. They kind of get overshadowed by Hendrick and Joe Gibbs Racing. But hey, we're not going to dive into that too much. We're going to save all that for when we got more time. So Marty, give us your final 4 drivers that you had predicted going into this playoff push. How are they looking? Are your 4 drivers still in it? Are you 50%? What are we looking like here?
They're still in it, baby. I have Larson, Blaney, Elliott, Bell, with Bell winning the championship. And since Josh and I both picked Bell, my backup for winning the championship is Ryan Blaney. So mine are still in it. They're not as safe. Blaney and Larson's not as safe as they were, but I fully expect them to come out of Bristol and continue moving forward in the playoffs.
I love that.
I'm still looking good with my championship 4. Larson, Logano, Reddick, Bell winning it all. So I'm pretty confident in those picks still going into race 3.
Yeah, opposite of the first 4 out, we all look pretty good. Our last 4 in. I have Reddick, who's sitting in 6th, Byron, who's sitting in 10th, Larson, who's sitting in 9th, and Bell, who's sitting in 2nd. I will say one thing. I'm a little disappointed with Byron at this point. I do have him as my championship winner. I feel like the guy's just kind of coasting at this point. He's kind of just riding the wave, going with the flow. Maybe he'll spice it up here in the next couple of weeks because he's going to have to if he's going to make a late push. The guy can absolutely go on runs with the best of them, can absolutely become an electric driver at times and really hit a hot streak. So I'm kind of hoping that happens towards the late push of this playoff push. Fellas, this has been awesome. Had a lot of good chit-chat, showed a lot of passion in this episode. Is there anything else you guys kind of want to hit on? Josh, I know you kind of told me you got a few things maybe that you want to talk about here. Marty, you've always got some good extra intel. What are we thinking, fellas? You guys got anything else for us?
I think pretty much anything I had to say, Marty covered in his rant earlier. And I feel like he covered it pretty well.
He didn't miss a beat. He did not miss a beat in that rant. I loved it.
No, I don't think he took a breath the whole time.
I worked myself up, man. I'm terrible about it.
You gave the warning. You said, fellas, this is coming. This is coming. I've had enough.
Okay, here you go. Juan Pablo Montoya looked great in that car this weekend. That was a beautiful paint scheme. He was out there. He was rubbing. He was racing. It's 10 years since he's up and in a Cup car. So that was beautiful to see. I like to see it.
Yeah, I miss that fella. I miss him a lot. He was a saucy fella out there. He would throw dukes with people. Handsome little fella. He would throw dukes with people. My biggest thing is this: look, playoff drivers, let's get it together this weekend. Go out, find some speed in your car, qualify well. I want to see the playoff drivers duking it out in the top 10 here for a good chunk of this race. And I'm not saying that I don't like upset winners. I do like upset winners, but I like upset winners to earn it. I want them to go up there and run and take it. I don't want them to get a late race caution and back into it. So Yeah, playoff drivers qualify well, load off the truck well, get your sim time in, figure it out. Let's have a good weekend.
Yeah, Colin, a few things I really want to get into about this race and what's going on in NASCAR is I want to get into the broadcast a little bit. You got to tip your hat to Lee Diffie. He's doing a tremendous job. He's doing an amazing job. He's coming in. He's had a few hiccups here and there, calling the wrong. I think they were at Darlington. He called it Martinsville or something like that. It happens, you know. But I think he's doing a tremendous job. And the way he's making these play calls, especially on the last 2 laps this week, when he's talking about SVG and Chris Buescher pushing for a win, and he's relating it to Marcus Ambrose and Brad Keselowski back in the day. And he was able to make that correlation because Ambrose is also from Australia, same as SVG. And Keselowski owns RFK, who Buescher is driving for. And it's pretty amazing how he's able to make these analogies on the fly. You got 2 laps left. It's down to the wire, and he's still able to make these analogies. And I'm really impressed with that. Now I'm going to get into a few things that I'm not impressed with the USA and their broadcasting. I'm tired of missing green lap racing. They're cutting to full commercials. They did it 3 or 4 times. I understand you have to get your ad revenue in, stuff like that. And then at other times, they're doing the in-race camera during their ads. I'm fine with that. If that's what we have to do, I'm fine with it. Stick to it. Stick to it. You guys are advertising me crooked dick pills, and they're telling me 1 in 3 Americans has a crooked dick. Which one of us is it? I don't know. But I'm tired of seeing these ads. You got these carrots falling down my screen. You know, this isn't what I want to see when we're under green flag. You know, they throw a caution. Advertise your crooked dick pills to me then. I do not want to see it during green flags. I'm so tired of seeing it. It's every week on USA. They really need to figure it out. Go back to Fox. I can't wait to go back to Fox. I can't wait to go back to NBC. And honestly, I'm looking forward to watching the races on Prime next year because what USA is doing with these ads it just drives me nuts. I'm missing the race. I'm missing it. I'm staying up for this. I'm waiting to go to work for this. I don't have time. I don't. I want to watch this race.
Hey, Josh, I've been moving my mouse this whole time with no hands, buddy. So, I mean, I don't want to point fingers at anybody, but maybe that's directed towards me.
I mean, you know what? So, yeah, Josh, back off. Marty needs these commercials, man. He's trying to learn something.
Dude, how bent is your dick that you need a pill?
You know, I think there's some ladies out there that might like that, but we can talk about that on a different podcast. But, I'll be real honest with you. I remember times where in the past where you miss a lot of green flag racing. So the fact that they will from time to time cut away to side by side, I do like that. But look, there's an unfortunate fact to this, and the network pays the bills. The network says what we do. They say when we wave the green flag, and they also say, hey, you want to move up that start time because of rain? No, we're not, because we got reruns of Days of Our Lives planned. No, we're not doing that. So they pay the bills. They're the boss.
You're not a Days of Our Lives fan? You're not a Days of Our Lives fan?
No. I never got sucked into that one, thank God. I'm not Mr. Mom. I'm not Michael Keaton, so no, I did not. But that is a big problem, though. They have a lot of power. We see it a lot when we know weather's coming. We can point to the Indy 500 Coke 600 fiasco that we had earlier in the year with Kyle Larson. No, you mean they rule the roost. They say when we're going to wave the green flag. They say when we're going to call the race. And it's frustrating. I get it, because I miss races starting around noon, around 1. I miss having to have part of my Sunday and then have to drop everything because, you know what, hey, NASCAR race is on. I really want to watch it. It starts at 2, 3, whenever the hell it starts. But there's not a whole lot we can do with it. Now, Lee Diffie is excellent. I have to agree 100% with Josh on this. The guy's just been spectacular. He calls races, and like Josh pointed out, for him to make that correlation on the fly, that I can't remember how many years ago it was, but it was Brad Keselowski, Kyle Busch, and Marcos Ambrose. I think there was oil on the track. Keselowski gets into Busch, he spins out. They're just a wild final lap to the win, and for him to correlate RFK to another Aussie with SVG on the fly like that, I thought was awesome. And it's nice to get a little bit of spice every now and again in our sport. Our sport gets dubbed as kind of a good old boys redneck club a lot. And I'd be lying if I said if you go to the racetrack, it's not that a lot of the time. But I will say this. I've been to a lot of sporting events, and I've met a lot of assholes out there. I've yet to meet an asshole at a NASCAR event. So I'll leave that as it is. I think Lee Diffie's great. I think he's doing great. I hope he's a joy to listen to. I enjoy looking forward to hearing him this weekend.
Well, you're exactly right, Marty. I don't have much to add about this, but you see this with every sport. You watch football, a team scores points, whether it's a field goal or a touchdown, you kick to a commercial. They come back to kick off, they kick to another commercial. I'll never understand it. While we're talking about it, I am going to tip my cap to one sport that's great about commercials: hockey and soccer.
Soccer nails it. Soccer nails it, man.
Soccer, they'll let the whole entire half of 45 minutes play and never interrupt your coverage. They'll never stop it.
They roll their ads on the sideboards and stuff, man.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I love it.
Can't NASCAR. I'm with you, Josh. I do think NASCAR should go a direction like that. You have a mile and a half, a mile, 2 miles of track where you can cover up with all the ads you want, where you shouldn't have to cut into commercials all the time. But yeah, I guess we're not the ones that make that decision. I'm sure we're not the only fans out there that notice this shit. I totally agree with you. I hate missing stuff that we're going to talk about in our show later. You know, we miss coverage of what we're going to talk about. Totally with you, Josh. Glad you brought that up. Also, Lee Diffie's great. Glad you guys gave him the credit that he's worth. Love it, fellas.
It's 2024. NASCAR, what are you doing? What are you doing? Get some sort of app, some subscription-based something. I will give you hundreds of my dollars to not miss a lap, to be able to put a camera on the pit crew that I want to follow. This car's coming in for pit. I want to be able to switch to that camera. I want to be able to see how this pit goes down. I want to have a live timer. I want to have all this.
I want idea.
I want the driver data that all these other teams are looking at. Give it to me. Give it to me. Stop giving me commercials.
Yeah.
NASCAR, get it together. Give me an app.
Yeah.
I'm such a nerd.
I love that.
I'm such a nerd that I will find races that happened 5 years ago because they will have the entire race from the driver's onboard camera. And I'll watch a 500 lap event on Brad Keselowski's onboard camera, Kyle Larson's onboard camera. I will watch the entire event from a roof cam or an onboard cam because you never miss a thing. And we're getting there. I feel like there's enough digital technology now where you can do digital overlays with sponsorships. You see it in hockey a lot on the glass behind the nets and along the boards. You know, you go to the ice rink and you don't see them rolling ads necessarily. Those are digital overlays that you can do now. There's other things they can do, but I do understand that the network pays the bills and it sucks. But things
Josh, that may be truly the best ideas I've ever heard you have. Could you imagine if we could subscribe to a driver's helmet cam where it's like we're driving the car the whole race and you can tune into your favorite driver and get exactly what you're asking for? That would be absolutely incredible. And you want to talk about growing the sport. You want to talk about getting young fans involved in the sport of NASCAR. If their dad or mom or whoever kicks on the race and they kick it over to Kyle Larson's helmet cam, holy hell. Everybody would be sitting down watching that.
I could be wrong about this, but I believe NASCAR.com does have a subscription base that you can do that on. But I'm tired of everybody nickel and diming me to get this stuff, man. If I'm already paying for it,
is it an app?
Anyways,
it's
on NASCAR.
TV?
I think you have to do it with a laptop or cell phone. You might be if you have a smart TV. I'm not sure you might be able to do it. But I used to watch NASCAR with my laptop. It used to be free. Maybe it still is. I don't think it is, but it used to be free. I would set up my laptop. It would have all their lap times. It would have their previous lap times. It would have like their 5 and 10 lap delta. It would have the fastest car on the track. It would have position. It would have like last pit and stuff like that on it. And it would have like a select 4 to 8 drivers that you could click on and watch their onboard. I don't know if they still do that anymore. I should probably know that, but unfortunately I don't. But
well, like Josh said, though, if we could do it like on like a Prime or a Peacock or something like that,
yep.
And then you can just get in there and select your teams, that would be awesome, man. That would be awesome because
yeah,
plugging a laptop or your desktop or whatever into your TV is probably not the most accessible thing in today's time. We're looking for easy ways to get after this, and if I can turn my TV on, pop open Prime, and I know I'm going to look for Kyle Larson's helmet cam, I'm all the way in.
I'm more thinking along the lines of NASCAR having their own app with all this stuff available, and they could do like hockey does, advertise on the wall.
advertise on the track for all I care. As long as it's not, messing up with the groove or something. But
yeah, they have
before a restart, call it, like a lap 135, blue emu restart zone or something. There's other ways you could figure out ways.
This is the Old Spice lap 140. What's wrong with that? There you go.
You got the grass at
racing.
Daytona. Throw an ad on that. You got all your billboards. Throw ads on those. And let me watch it through an app, and I can switch between my drivers. I can switch between a broadcast, and I can switch to my pits. And I want to be able to see my car information.
Just don't disturb Talladega Boulevard, please. Just leave that alone. I love that place. It's a beautiful place.
A lot of wild shit happens out there.
That's all I gotta say. The crooked dick pills, just get it out. Out.
I love it. I love it, fellas. This is awesome. All right. Deep Thread Sports Network fans, race fans, that's going to go ahead and do it here for us with the Splash and Go podcast. Reminder, Bass Pro Shops night race at Bristol, 6:30 USA Network, Saturday, September 21st. 500 laps coming at you. This is going to be exciting. I love me a good night race. I cannot wait for this one. Fellas, this has been awesome. It's been real. I'm glad we could bring you all this content. Once again, that's Josh. That's Marty. I'm Collin. Be on the lookout. We'll be at you every week. Until next time, peace.
See you, fellas. Chirp me in the comments if you don't like anything. I'll comment back. I'll be nice.
See ya.